A common market girl? Chief Donald's voice boomed through their Victoria Island mansion. What did I send you to Harvard for? To fall in love with poverty? Welcome to Tales by Steph, a home of interesting African stories. Anthony Obiora Williams was a name that made headlines. At only 32, he was already among Nigeria's wealthiest bachelors, CEO of Obiora Holdings, owner of 3 estates in Lagos, 2 in Abuja, and 1 quiet palace-like home in Enugu. Women wanted him, men admired or envied him. But beneath all the luxury, Tony was haunted by one thing, a jagged birthmark on the left side of his neck, shaped like a crescent moon. Some said it was a sign of greatness. Others whispered it was a curse, but Tony didn't care. That was until the day love found him. Not in boardrooms or lavish parties, but in the small dusty market of Makoko. Her name was Sandra, a trader's daughter. She sold fresh peppers, onions, and bitterleaf in a corner of the market where very few billionaires dared to tread. But Tony wasn't like other billionaires. He had driven himself that day without a driver or security detail, trying to escape the weight of meetings and board politics. He stopped to buy some water and instead found eyes that stopped time. Sandra was dark-skinned, her beauty striking in its simplicity. She wore no makeup, just sweat from hard work and a humility that radiated from her spirit. She looked up from her table and met his eyes. Something shifted. "Do you need something, Oga?" she asked, not knowing who he was. Tony smiled. "Yes. Your name." Sandra frowned. "Name? You came to buy pepper, not names." Tony laughed, a full, genuine laugh he hadn't felt in months. That was how it began. Tony kept coming back, first with excuses. "I forgot to buy enough onions. The water from here tastes fresher." But soon he didn't bother with lies. He came to see Sandra, and she came to expect him. They started talking, then laughing, then walking, then loving. When his father, Chief Donald Williams, found out about Sandra, the house shook. Literally. "A common market girl," Chief Donald's voice boomed through their Victoria Island mansion. "What did I send you to Harvard for? To fall in love with poverty? She's not poor. She's hard-working." "She's not your class," his father yelled, slamming a cane on the glass table, shattering it. "You will end this nonsense today." "I won't," Tony said, his voice calm but firm. "I love her. I want to marry her. Over my dead body." Tony walked out. The echo of his father's words followed him like a curse, but nothing could have prepared him for what came next. Weeks passed. Sandra noticed her body changing. She felt dizzy, tired, nauseous. A quick visit to the local chemist confirmed it. She was pregnant. Tony was the first person she called. "Tony, I have news," she said nervously. "I'm pregnant." There was silence, then a small laugh followed by a sob. I'm happy, Sandra, but my father, he said he'd rather die than see us together." Sandra held her belly. "Then let him die." Tony chuckled through his pain. "If only it were that simple." Sandra's voice softened. "I'll raise the child. I promise to take care of her, with or without you." Those words broke Tony. "Please don't say that." "But it's the truth." Later that night, Sandra packed her things. She didn't tell Tony. She didn't say goodbye. She left Makoko, left the city, and vanished like mist at dawn. Tony searched for weeks. He went to the market. Sandra was gone. He asked the traders. Nobody knew. He checked the hospitals, the churches, the bus parks. Nothing. He cried. Yes, the billionaire with a private jet sat alone in a church pew one night and wept like a child. His heart wasn't broken. It was missing. Meanwhile, Sandra arrived in Benin City with just one bag, her swollen belly, and a head full of worry. She found a small, uncompleted building near the outskirts and began working at a food canteen. Life was hard. The owner underpaid her. Rain beat her roof. She ate once a day. But Sandra endured for her unborn baby. And then, after hours of labor on a rainy Tuesday morning, a cry pierced the room. It was a girl, beautiful, dark-eyed, a full head of curly hair, and right there on the left side of her neck, it was unmistakable, a birthmark, a crescent moon. Sandra wept. "Zendaya," she whispered. "Your name is Zendaya. God's grace." Zendaya grew up in that same broken building. She never knew her father. Whenever she asked, Sandra would say, "He's not here, my love, but you have me." Zendaya didn't complain. Even as a child, she worked, sweeping the canteen, fetching water, helping neighbors. By 10, she was known as the small girl with the big heart. By 16, she had outgrown her surroundings in spirit. She was bold, smart, and charming. And that birthmark made people stare. Some thought it was beautiful. Others called it strange. But Zendaya wore it with pride, and fate, it seemed, was waiting. It was an ordinary Wednesday. Sandra had gone to the canteen. Zendaya, now 21, had gone to the central market to buy onions. She wore a simple gown and tied her hair in a scarf. At the vegetable section, a black SUV parked quietly. A man in his early 50s stepped out. Dressed simply in a blue caftan, he looked around, almost lost in thought. That man was Tony Obiora Williams. He wasn't looking for anyone, just passing through on his way to inspect a property he'd forgotten he owned. Then he saw her, not her face. First, the neck, that crescent moon, exactly like his. He froze. She turned to pay for the onions, then caught him staring. "Can I help you, sir?" Tony walked closer, his heart racing. Your neck, that mark, where did you get it?" Zendaya raised an eyebrow. "I didn't buy it. I was born with it." "Who is your father?" "My father died before I was born." Tony's lips trembled. "And your mother?" "She's at home." "Why?" He swallowed hard, emotion clawing at his throat. "Please, can I see her?" Zendaya stared at the strange man, unsure whether to trust him or call security. But something about his eyes, those eyes, stopped her. Eyes that looked like hers. The air felt heavier than usual as Zendaya walked home with the man who claimed to be nothing more than a passerby. But his trembling hands and glassy eyes told another story. She clutched her bag of onions tightly, occasionally glancing sideways at him. Tony couldn't stop staring at her. The way she walked, the sharp curve of her jawline, even her silence. It was all Sandra. His Sandra. And that mark on her neck. He'd seen it in the mirror all his life. "Are you sure I'm not bothering you?" Tony asked gently. Zendaya stopped. "You're a stranger who saw me in the market and asked to meet my mother because of a birthmark. So yes, you're bothering me, but you're also intriguing." Tony chuckled softly, his voice almost catching in his throat. "Fair enough." They reached a narrow compound tucked behind a wooden gate. Chickens scattered as Zendaya pushed open the rusty door. Clotheslines stretched across the courtyard. In one corner, a woman stirred soup in a pot on a coal stove, humming softly. "Sandra?" Tony froze. Time did too. She looked up, and the ladle dropped from her hand. Sandra's eyes locked with Tony's. The pot bubbled behind her. Her heart thundered. The last face she ever expected to see was standing in her compound, older, more refined, but still undeniably Tony. "Tony," she whispered. Zendaya turned between them, confused. "Wait, you know each other?" Neither parent answered immediately. Sandra broke first. She wiped her hands on her wrapper and walked forward, every step heavy with the weight of years lost. "What are you doing here?" Tony's voice was hoarse. "I didn't know you left. I searched. I begged the market women. Nobody knew where you'd gone. You vanished." Sandra laughed bitterly. "And what would you have done if you found me? Take me back to your father so he could disgrace me again." "My father is dead, Sandra." She blinked. "What?" "He passed 5 years ago." Sandra looked away, the shock written all over her face. "I looked for you," Tony continued, "but I never found you. Until today, when I saw her. Her neck." Zendaya stepped back. "What is going on, Mama?" Sandra swallowed hard. "My daughter. Meet your father." Zendaya staggered back. "No, that's impossible. You told me he died." Sandra's face crumpled. "I had to. I wanted to protect you. From a world that wouldn't understand. From pain. From disappointment." Zendaya shook her head. "You lied." "I was trying to survive." Zendaya stormed into the room and slammed the door. The silence that followed felt like a knife against skin. Tony turned to Sandra. "I didn't come to fight. I didn't even know she existed." Sandra sat down on the wooden bench beside the coal stove. "She was all I had, Tony. I sold pepper with my back breaking and my stomach heavy. I nearly died in labor. There were nights we drank garri and ate nothing else for days." "Where were you then?" "I was lost," he said, his voice cracking. "I let my father scare me into silence. When you left, I was broken. I thought you aborted the baby or left because I was weak. I didn't know, Sandra. I would have taken care of both of you." She looked at him. "But you didn't." Tony sat beside her. "I'm not here to make excuses. I want to know her. I want to be her father, if she'll let me." Sandra exhaled. "You're 5 years too late. Please, let me try." Just then, Zendaya opened the door. Her face was blank, her eyes distant. "If you're really my father, prove it." Tony looked up. "How?" She walked to him and leaned forward. "Tell me why you left my mother. Why you didn't come back. Why I had to grow up watching her suffer." Tony looked into her eyes. They were like his mother's, piercing and unforgiving. "I was afraid," he said. "Afraid of my father. Afraid of losing everything. But what I lost was greater. Both of you." Zendaya didn't blink. "I don't need a father. I needed him when Mama cried herself to sleep. I needed him when I wore patched uniforms. I needed him when boys mocked me for my birthmark." Tony stood. "I can't change the past, but I can be here now. Let me prove it to you." Sandra stood between them. "We've lived this long without you, Tony. We don't need charity." "I'm not offering charity. I'm offering a second chance." Days passed. Tony returned, again and again. He brought groceries, not just for them, but for neighbors. He paid off Sandra's landlord. He asked for nothing in return. Zendaya remained cold. But one night, while helping a child with homework, she saw Tony helping an old woman fix her stall outside. She watched silently, tears filling her eyes. She wasn't ready to forgive, but she was beginning to understand. One morning, Sandra found an envelope by her doorstep. Inside were legal documents. Tony had created a trust in Zendaya's name. "You didn't have to do this," Sandra said when he came that evening. "I know, but I wanted to." Zendaya held the papers. "So I'm a billionaire's daughter now." Tony smiled. "Number you've always been her? You're just finding out now." Zendaya's lips quivered. "Don't expect me to hug you." Tony laughed. "A handshake will do." She extended her hand. "One condition." "Anything. Tell me everything about you, who you are, where you live, why you have this same stupid birthmark." Tony grinned. "Deal." The days that followed were like scenes from a dream Zendaya wasn't sure she wanted to wake from. Tony didn't just try to show up, he showed out. One afternoon, a brand new silver SUV parked in front of their compound. Neighbors rushed out, mouths wide open. Tony stepped out, opened the door for Zendaya, and handed her the keys. "What's this?" she asked, blinking in disbelief. "A gift," Tony said. "You'll need it when you start working with me." "Working with you?" Sandra cut in from the porch, arms crossed. "Doing what?" Tony smiled. "Zendaya is sharp. She's more than just my daughter. She has the mind of a leader. I want to mentor her. She can help manage one of the new NGOs we're launching, focusing on supporting single mothers and girls from poor backgrounds." Sandra stared at him, stunned. "Zendaya, too." "You think I can do that?" Zendaya asked, voice low. "I know you can," Tony replied. And just like that, the girl who once hawked vegetables on the street became the youngest member of the Obiora Foundation's executive team. Tony flew Zendaya and Sandra to Lagos. Zendaya's jaw dropped the moment she saw his mansion, a white 3-story building with marble floors, glass balconies, and a swimming pool shaped like Africa. Her new room was 3 times the size of their old apartment. There were gold curtains, a walk-in closet, and a bathroom with a chandelier. At first, Zendaya tiptoed around like a visitor. By the end of the week, she was confidently clicking heels through the halls. But not everyone welcomed her return. Sophia Obiora was Tony's cousin, beautiful, influential, and jealous. She had always imagined herself inheriting more than just family shares. Tony had once promised to sponsor her fashion business, but since Zendaya arrived, his attention had shifted entirely. "She's just a market girl," Sophia hissed to her friend over wine, "with a fancy birthmark and a sad story." Her friend leaned closer. "What if you find out more about her past, or her mother's? What if there's something scandalous?" Sophia smirked. "Exactly my thoughts. It started with anonymous messages. Do you even know if he's your real father? Ask your mother who she really was." Zendaya ignored them, at first, but then came the photos. A wrinkled old envelope delivered to her office. Inside were pictures, grainy but clear, of her mother years ago, sitting with a much older man. In some, they were holding hands. Zendaya's heart thudded. She showed them to her mother that night. "Mama, who is this man?" Sandra's face went pale. She sat down without answering. "Mama?" Sandra finally looked up. "Before I met your father, I was engaged to someone else, a man who promised marriage. He left me the day after I gave him everything." Zendaya's eyes widened. "Did he?" "No," Sandra said quickly. "You're Tony's child. I never slept with that man. When I realized I was pregnant for Tony, I told him immediately. But his father didn't approve of our relationship. But the birthmark confirmed everything." Zendaya sat in silence. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Because I was ashamed. Sophia wasn't done. She hired a lab technician, bribed him, tampered with records. She leaked a fake DNA result claiming Tony was not Zendaya's father. It hit the blogs. The media exploded. Tony Obiora's alleged daughter exposed as fraud. Birthmark or Birthly?" Zendaya sat in Tony's study, her phone buzzing endlessly with hate messages and insults. Tony entered. "Don't read them. They're saying you're not my father." Tony sat beside her and pulled out an envelope. "That's because someone paid to fake it." She turned sharply. "What?" "I already did the real DNA test, the day I saw the birthmark. These are the results. You are my daughter. No doubt." Tears welled up in her eyes. "I should have told you earlier," he added, "but I was waiting for the right time. And now that time has come." He passed her another envelope. "What's this?" she asked. "A legal amendment to my will. You're my sole heir, Zendaya." Sophia screamed when she found out. "Over my dead body." Her voice echoed through her apartment like thunder. She had a plan. It wasn't enough to humiliate Zendaya. Now, she wanted to destroy her. Zendaya stopped reading. Her hands shook too much. Her chest stayed tight. Even the workers in Tony's estate had started whispering. "Mama," she asked one evening as they sat on the marble balcony, "what if this whole dream comes crashing down?" Sandra looked at her daughter, the same girl she had carried through storms, sickness, and hunger, and smiled. "If it does, we'll start again, like we always do." Tony sat in the boardroom of Obiora Holdings, surrounded by directors and executives who had once feared his silence, but now feared his loyalty to the daughter no one believed in. "We need to control this narrative," one said. "Maybe suspend Zendaya's appointment for now," another suggested. Tony stood, slow and deliberate. "Let me be clear. Zendaya is my daughter, by blood, by spirit, by heaven's design. Anyone who questions that can find the door." Silence fell like a hammer. Tony left the room and called his lawyers. It was time for war. The next morning he held a press conference. The hall was packed. Reporters, bloggers, live streamers. Zendaya sat beside him, hands clasped tight. Sandra was in the front row, holding back tears. Tony stepped to the podium. "Months ago, I found my daughter, Zendaya Sandra Obiora. I didn't know she existed, but the moment I saw her, I recognized her. Not just the birthmark on her neck that mirrors mine, but her soul, her courage, her mother's fire." He paused, eyes scanning the sea of cameras. Some people questioned her legitimacy, some spread lies. But today I put all doubt to rest. He held up a large envelope. "This is a verified DNA test. You may examine it. I also have sworn affidavits, photographs, and statements proving Sandra's truth and integrity. More importantly, I have something you can't fake. 21 years of silent suffering, strength, and grace." He turned to Zendaya. "You are my daughter, and I am proud of you." The room burst into applause. By evening, the truth about the fake DNA leak surfaced. The lab technician confessed. Sophia's emails were leaked. She was arrested and charged with defamation, tampering with medical documents, and conspiracy to blackmail. Her photos, once filtered with perfection, were now replaced by mugshots. And Zendaya, she trended for the right reasons. Zendaya, the resilient. From garri to gold. The real Obiora daughter weeks passed. Tony bought Sandra a house, a quiet mansion near the water, not flashy, just peaceful. He offered her anything: staff, trips, cars. She accepted only the house. "I don't want to lose who I am," she said. "You never will," Tony replied. "You're the reason we are who we are." Zendaya began hosting mentorship programs for teenage girls. She became a voice, a symbol, a beacon. But the most touching moment came one quiet Sunday. Zendaya and Tony walked through a small village where they met a girl hawking sachet water. Zendaya stopped and bought two. "What's your name?" she asked. "Anu." "Do you go to school?" "No, mama no get money." Zendaya looked at her father. He nodded. She turned back to the girl. "Now you do." That evening, Zendaya stood before a crowd at the launch of her foundation, the Crescent Grace Initiative. She spoke with fire. "I was born with a mark on my neck. Some thought it was a curse, but that mark became the beginning of my story, proof that what is meant for you cannot be erased." She looked out at her mother and father, holding hands in the front row. "I am Zendaya Sandra Obiora, daughter of a market woman, daughter of a billionaire, and I am not ashamed of either side." The crowd rose. Thunderous applause filled the room, and in that moment Zendaya knew she hadn't just found her father, she had found herself. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like, and comment.